Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 58 of the Dynasty Junkies podcast, a proud member of the Dynasty Addicts Podcast Network. I am your host, Rocky Petrella at Dynasty FF Addict, and football is back literally as we speak. Football is going on and will be for every week for the rest of the year up until the Super Bowl. And not only is football back, but prodigal host Scott Sidlow is back. So, Scott, how you doing now? How you been? And are you excited that the football is underway, even though it's third and fourth stringers tonight?
Hey guys, I forget how to do this. It's been a while. Yeah, Claypool just went down. Looks like he's out for the season, so that's cool. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. People need to stop overreacting to this stuff. Seriously, that's what I'm going to start with. But yeah, no, man. Super happy to be back here with you tonight, Rocky, and we have an amazing host for my first night back, so I'm super stoked about that. Amazing guest. Sorry.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I believe you do have.
Yeah,
an amazing
we have
host,
a mediocre host, amazing guest. Yes,
we do have an amazing guest
as usual.
The now bearded Chad Parsons from Football Guys and Under the Helmet. Chad, how are you doing tonight?
Doing great. Yeah, football's here. And man, I watch way too much preseason. I'll just say that out of the gate. But I always say there's things to glean, and it's not, necessarily who averages the most per carry or anything like that. I'm looking at rotations for running backs, especially because you can find some values, who's an injury away guy, who's actually running back 3, running back 4. I don't really glean a ton else, but it is nice to see, since we didn't see it last year. We're going to have 2 sets of young players that didn't see a whole lot of regular season action, maybe fringe roster guys that we want to take on, so at least in August, that's what we're going to get. We're going to get a double dip of 2020 and now 2021 rookies.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited to have football back. And yeah, I don't glean a ton from the preseason either. I think it tends to be a little overrated I think we all remember Amir Abdullah making that cut and and running, however long for a touchdown. And
no, it wasn't a touchdown. He got tracked down. And see, that was the funniest thing. I was like, there's that 4.60 speed. He got tracked down by some, it was like a safety or a linebacker or something. I'd be like, that was more telling than the breakaway.
Yeah, but a lot of people, read more into preseason than I do. But it's just exciting to have it back. It's I'm very happy that we're going to be having football games, very real football games, very soon. That's the biggest thing for me. It's the signal that football is back. So we're going to get into the show here. Before we get into our main topic, I did just want to touch briefly, because pretty much all the stuff with it went down since our last show last Thursday. Was the Carson Wentz injury. The foot issue, the awesome 5 to 12 week time span for his injury, which I'm convinced is the Colts,
because of the draft pick.
Yeah, as an Eagles fan, I'm convinced that's if we start 3-1, he's out a lot longer than 5 or 6 weeks. If we start 0-2, he's coming back, and that way we don't have to go up.
75% is the threshold.
Yes, and so about he has to miss 4 or 5 games, and we're screwed as Eagles fans. But out of our first round,
you're assuming he plays the whole time when he comes back. See, that's the other thing. You're like, oh, he just needs to play 75% of the games, as long as he gets in there. Okay.
But Chad, does this, given that in Dynasty, does this affect anything as far as Carson Wentz's value for you?
Well, I think it does a little bit, because you were probably looking at him as like a streaming committee guy in a 1 quarterback, and a guy that you thought would have a pretty good floor, ceiling questionable on a team that's going to play defense, run the ball, but this is going to affect his mobility a little bit. It's also going to take away valuable games for a guy that's in a, let's face it, prove it season. So I think that, along with Quentin Nelson, doesn't help guys like Jonathan Taylor, for example. I know my redraft rankings over at Football Guys, I downgraded T.Y. Hilton and the notable wide receivers a little bit, just because they're going to have some questions. I don't think they're going to make a big splash at quarterback just for a cross section. They're going to try to stay above water. But for Jonathan Taylor, I'm always going to preach, just like last year, you got to be patient. He's a big time talent. And even if he gets, like, I don't know with Nyheim Hines and even if they run the ball a ton, I think that there's going to be enough competition for touches And now the passing game is going to be a little bit of a question mark for a cross section of the year. He may be a low running back 1 or high running back 2, but long-term lens. He's 22 years old. He's already off to a great start, and you have to absorb some down seasons. So he's the most notable asset. And with Carson Wentz, he's still going for a first in some of these super flex leagues. I don't know how you can pay that. And I don't know how you could really say no to that, because you can find cheaper guys like Ryan Fitzpatrick, who's on a 1-year lens or a year-to-year lens, and some of these other guys that, let's face it, I mean, Wentz doesn't have that much more allegiance for how long is he going to be a starter without a break. Could he turn into Marcus Mariota, where he's looking for another gig and he's a backup now? So I have some pause there, and I don't think the upside is super great. So I would be selling for a first. And again, I just don't think the ceiling is super high when he comes back. You're almost looking at Phillip Rivers last year in the sense of he was kind of, QB 18, 20, 24. He was posting, but he's just not making a difference.
Yeah, and I get the caution with Wentz, and especially with the injury, I did like him to bounce. I don't think there's any way he could be as bad as last year, but so I did like him to bounce back, especially with Frank Reich. But this, especially if he's out like 4, 5, 6 weeks, I think it's going to be tough to get in a rhythm. He's not going to have time with his receivers, all that stuff. I think I probably would still pay it first, because I think unless he's just as bad as last year, I don't know if I'd pay much more than a first, but unless he's just as bad as last year, I think they are going to commit to him. I think he's going to be decent. Even last year, a lot of people don't necessarily realize when he went down, if you exclude the game he was benched because he was god awful in real life, but going into that game, he was QB 12 in 4-point passing touchdown league. So he was still producing. He just was throwing way too many picks, getting too many sacks, getting too many fumbles. But you have another thought there, Chad?
Well, I was going to ask, so 2 polarizing guys, from a few years ago, who do you think has more NFL starts from this point forward, Carson Wentz or Jared Goff?
I think Carson Wentz. What do you think, Scott?
Because Goff is cheaper, so.
I do think I think Wentz is going to be a multi-year starter. I think.
Okay.
I think they at least give him through next year. And like I said, I still expect that he should. I mean, like I said, unless this injury and the time missed just messes him up too much. But if he gets Nelson back, he's got a better line than he had in Philly. I just think with Reich there, he'll produce more than he did last year, and they'll be willing to stick with him with what they invested in him. Well,
you said Wentz is, if he costs a first, does Tom Brady cost that much more, if anything more? In Dynasty, I mean, if he gives you one more QB 8-9 season or something, isn't that worth pretty much as much or more than if Wentz starts the next 2 seasons? I mean, like, high impact is high impact. So I don't know. Like, I would rather go, like, give me Ben Roethlisberger and the chance that he produces really well with the weapons he has this year, even if he ends up retiring. I don't know. I think there's some pivots at quarterback that might be similar or cheaper. Would be my biggest thing.
And I don't disagree with you. I mean, totally, because that's the kind of thing I generally like to do. I generally, Scott will tell you, I buy the cheaper quarterbacks, and those old guys you can always get cheaper.
Matt Ryan might be the same cost.
Yeah. So but Scott, what are your thoughts on this whole situation and any of the other Colts players we haven't talked about yet?
I mean, I think the thing for a lot of people I've talked to is that you've seen the upside from Wentz, and so. Comparing to a guy like Goff or Carr or, any of those guys, really. I mean, it's, he can do it.
Technically, you've seen the magical year from those guys, too. I know you just picked 2 guys that definitely haven't shown it in a while, but yeah.
I get, Carr several years ago before he broke his back and all that. But, I don't know that, like, he's still relatively young, but I think our expectations are like falsely, I don't know the way to put it, but like you have these guys playing. I mean, Tom Brady just turned 43, 44, like 44, I think, because Zach Wilson just turned 22. I think, is that it? And he's literally double his age. So the guy's 44, and I mean, we've seen some of these guys just go long, but I think when we look back many years from now, they're going to be outliers. I mean, I'm not saying there's not going to be other quarterbacks that can play to 40, but I just don't think we're going to see that many do it. So to say like, well, Wentz could have another 8-10 years, like I think there's just no chance he does. Like I think that's a 0% chance he would have that longevity, even if he shows flashes this year or comes back and plays well, whatever. So I don't know. I think I'd rather kind of take my chances. Like I think we were spoiled with this rookie class having so many quarterbacks to choose from, and that made it harder to like give up a first for a quarterback. And I think next year we're gonna have a lot of quarterbacks too, or at least 3 or 4, and usually someone comes out of nowhere.
Well, they're replacing somebody, so every depth chart those first rounders go on, clock is ticking
but
on the other
I'll
guy,
take
so.
I'll take the chance on a guy like Zach Wilson, for example. I don't like Zach Wilson, right? He's like my 4th quarterback in this class, but I'd still rather have him than Wentz. So like I just feel like there's
the unknown versus the risk that you do know. that the signs we have on a mid-career guy or back half career guy, right? Yeah. I get that part, and obviously the calculus change if you go down to maybe Mac Jones or especially beyond that, or again if you're talking sort of Devy projection of like, oh well, a guy that's still in college. I mean, there's a lot of risk and things like that. But I do think the retread, and Carson Wentz is certainly in that now, the retread market in Superflex is pretty fascinating. Like I'm in this one league where they pretty much churn quarterbacks and everything else is Dynasty. And so it makes it like a year-to-year, closer to a year-to-year game at the quarterback position. And so that's what makes it interesting about, if you don't worry about age, you're kind of thinking of the next couple of years at most, then you realize sort of what quarterbacks you view as stable versus not, because now you're not thinking about 5 years from now. And certainly, guys like Winston or Wentz or Goff or, these guys, frankly, are fighting for jobs, and none of them, if they have a poor year, are guaranteed for 2022.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. And you definitely can play even in a regular Dynasty league. You can kind of play that churning the quarterback game, even in Superflex. I think I've done it in a lot of leagues. You just go from your Drew Breeses and Phillip Rivers to your Matt Ryans to your Kirk Cousins to your as each guy progressively gets older, they become more of a value, and you just keep cycling through them.
Well, it also seems like isn't there like a Rivers would have that down year, right, where he would throw like 16 picks, and people like, oh, like he's on the downside, or Eli Manning would have a horrible year, but still their job was not really in jeopardy because of the track record they had built up. And I'm really becoming, as I become older and more seasoned, I'm kind of noticing who are the guys. It seems like Russell Wilson has a stink this offseason. Part of that was the trade maybe, but also, they're going to run the ball, and he's not happy with the organization, all this stuff. So you can just have to, Matt Ryan now, it's like, even though they didn't draft Trey Lance, it's like they still have sort of that means he's going to get replaced next year. It doesn't mean any of this. Like, so I think that you have to find who has the stink. And there's always 2 or 3 really good profile guys and they might be 28, they might be 35, they might be 38, but they are pretty cheap compared to even 12 months ago. And for me, it's always tractor beaming towards those.
Right. Okay, so I guess we'll finish. That'll finish up our Wentz and our I guess our general quarterback talk is what it turned into. But we're gonna get into the main topic we have for the show here, which is that I had bookmarked a tweet I saw back in June. I want to give credit to the person who put it. It was @_tanho. He said that I think the 5 biggest philosophical debates in Dynasty fantasy football are, and he gave 5 different things: value versus production, analytics versus film, talent versus situation, studs versus depth, and team structure versus player evaluation. I don't really want to get into the film versus analytics thing. That's not as interesting to me, but I thought the other 4 could make for some interesting discussion. Specifically, the value versus production, the first one, that's kind of been a pet topic on this show. It's especially the co-host we don't have here tonight, Andrew. It's something he's harped on and something I've harped on a little bit. I think we both kind of feel like that production can sometimes be undervalued in Dynasty, compared to age, compared to security and all those things. So where do you, and I want to give the disclaimer here, obviously with all 4 of these things we're going to talk about, you obviously want a combination of the two, ideally, but I think most Dynasty players lean one way or the other. So where do you stand on this value versus production thing, Chad?
Well, value to me is 2 things. You got roster value, so that is to you. lineup value, if you want to use that as another proxy statement. So that is just, I have them, I'm starting them. Think of it like redraft if there's no trading. I mean, that's kind of how you would, ongoing redraft. It's specifically in your little bubble. And then you have value, which would probably be roster value, market value of liquidity. Can you move that to something else? In a general sense, when you say this player or this asset and you just say it to your league mates, what would be the general interest level? And that could be specific to a win now team or a rebuilding team or everybody, a global asset that everyone's going to have at least some passing or stabilized middle ground interest, I would say. I've leaned more of this kind of two roster theory, which is you need a little of both. That I think you can have a lot of your lineup, and I'm actually kind of shifting my way towards this. And part of it is 2021. This is, to me, the glory days. Like, this may go down as the best offseason ever for the 26 to 30-year-old wide receiver that's just falling through the floor in market value and in startup value that you can build. I mean, you can wait till, I can never recall this. You can wait till round 5 or 6 to start drafting wide receivers, and you could still have a team that finishes top 3 or 4 of the position in your entire league with just those drafted guys. And that goes, again, round 4, 5 through 10 or 12 in Superflex. And so to me, I don't care. If I've had Mike Evans for years, I've drafted more shares, in startups or acquired in trades. I don't care. You're telling me he's round 5, 6, whatever, and next year you're guaranteeing that he's going to be round 8 or something. I don't care. So he's falling in value. So with wide receivers, it's so hard to identify who's actually good and who's going to be a passing game through alpha, that when you find that guy, I don't care if they're 25, 22, or 30, you cannot say, I'm not interested, because everybody else is a secondary guy in the NFL. You have no idea. They might have a perfect storm season, but you don't know until they've done it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times of unequivocally, I am the guy. I am your captain now. Like, you have to, take those and respect those profiles. And so when they get to 27, 28, it's finally when you feel really confident in them. And yet then that's when you're going to start fading them because of their age. It doesn't make sense to me. So with wide receivers, I'm okay with them being old. Keenan Allen, I have a lot of confidence that his game is going to progress well. Now, I mean, injuries can change that, but you know what? Injuries can change the trajectory for anybody. How about Hakeem Nicks, right? I mean, he was on a young, great track. He didn't make it. And so it can derail things if you're young or old. But Keenan Allen, the route running, the technician, everything kind of aligns with a guy that you wouldn't be surprised at 32, 33 years old if he's still chugging along, almost like a Larry Fitz, and he's still in your lineup, even though no one wants to give a second for him. That's fine by me. So I think part of your, and again, centric to maybe your lineup, it's okay. As long as you have, I always say with a wide receiver core, mix in a Brandon Ayuk. Maybe you got, a Brandon Ayuk and maybe a Chase Claypool, or, just 1 or 2 guys, Rashad Bateman. I mean, it doesn't take, 7 wide receivers that are under 25 years old to say I'm balanced. I mean, you can have a bunch of old guys and, a couple nice pedigree options mixed in to give you some optionality for upside in the future to get you through and bridge the gap, because you're going to buy other guys like Tyler Lockett, when they fall to the floor. So for wide receiver especially, I think you really have to lean on the roster value and kind of ignore the value for your lineup, because production is king. And I'm not saying you play everything like redraft, but we already talked about quarterback a little bit. Tight end is also a position. By the time you do it 2, 3, 4 times, people might discount you for age. So running back, I do think you'd be a little sensitive with age, just because the fall off can be swift. But the other passing game centric positions, I think you really have to be a little more internal about how you think about value and building your team, that you're setting lineups. You're building the team for yourself and not for your league mates, not for the quote unquote marketplace.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that you specifically brought up receiver, because I think that is the perfect example of this. I was just reading something from Mike Tagliere today. That was saying that basically their peak seasons are from like 28 to 31. In terms of being top 5, top 12, top 24 even. So and a lot of the Dynasty community, I feel like, is like, if they hit 28, you need to sell. No matter who they are, you need to sell because they're getting old and they're going to decline from here. And really, they're still right in the midst of their prime at 28. So, like, why are we selling a Devontae Adams? If you sold Julio Jones at 28, last year was a down year, but you missed probably, I think it was 1,500-yard seasons. So,
you finally got it right. That's like yes. They give. That's like you're gonna get an A on the test. All you got to do is show up, and then you go, I'm too cool for that. No, like you finally got the answers to the test, which is Devontae Adams is good, or Mike Evans is good, or Tyler Lockett's good, or whatever it is. And then you go, I got to get out of here. It's almost like, I think it's like a relationship when it's like you have this aversion to, like, I guess, true intimacy or whatever, where it's like the moment someone's like, no, I love you. No, I want you to stay. I really think we have a future here. And you go, ooh, I got to run. I got appointments. Like, so I think that's the equivalency of like, we make it too complicated, right? We want to be early and right on the next guy. So so you trade for a 21-year-old, 22-year-old so that you can be right when you may sharpshoot Justin Jefferson or whatever. And man, isn't it glorious? You now have a 22-year-old and you're going to have 5 years where you don't worry. And then you're going to look out the side window and look to trade him for the next 21-year-old. But you do that one time wrong. If you don't get let's say you, instead of Justin Jefferson, sure. I mean, or yeah. I mean, again, it could be anybody of you just didn't get it right. I mean, what if right now you earmark Laviska Shenault, and what if that's wrong? Like, what if his best season ever is wide receiver 31? Like, that is rubbing it all over your face wrong, and you're just going to be living in that for years. So I think it's really important that, and who knows, 2 years ago, someone might have said Tyler Boyd was going to be the guy, or whoever came out of the gates, DJ Chark. I mean, there are a number of quote unquote wrong answers with where we sit today. If you had anointed and done that fuzzy math of, I got to get younger.
Yeah, you said exactly what I was going to say. I mean, it's great if, like you say, you transition from a Devontae Adams to, let's say, CeeDee Lamb, breaks out this year. But at this point, the way the Dynasty community goes, I don't even know if you can get CeeDee Lamb straight up for Devontae Adams. So he's already shown a little. So when you're transitioning from one of these older guys to a younger, I mean, you really have to get it right, or you're screwing yourself out of possibly multiple years of production. And as you said, I mean, we play this game to win. You need points to win. Pretty rosters are nice, but I definitely lean more towards the production side. As we said, you want a mix. You want some of those value guys. But you definitely want a good portion of those production guys. And I tend to lean more towards that side. I'm like what you said. I've seen that they've done it 1, 2, 3, 4 times. That means a lot more to me than the fact that he's 23. But Scott, where do you fall on this?
Okay, so first, let me just say, like, the whole film versus analytics thing. Like, if you're not doing both, you're doing it wrong, and or you just don't care, and that's fine too. Maybe you just don't have the time, or you're not in 46 dynasty leagues like I am, and that's okay. Like, you can have your resources. You can have your Chad Parsons and all these other guys that you lean on who are great with film and analytics and other things that they do. And so that's fine. That's the same thing as if you don't trust yourself to do it, or you don't know what you're looking at or whatever, you lean on your resources. So that's really not an argument to me. Now, as far as these 4 topics, I think value versus production is the easiest to me. And the simplest example I can give is just working right off what Chad said. It brought up several players. So I have a roster where I have Mike Evans and Tyler Boyd and DeAndre Hopkins and Julio Jones. And like, I'm sitting here going, okay, I'm a contender. Why would I move one of these guys? Like, yeah, if the right trade came along, okay. But like, we just had our draft recently. It's a late one for whatever reason. And I got offered like a first and something else for Hopkins. And I was like, that's probably fine. I mean, the guy's getting older, whatever, but what his production is going to be for me the next few years.
Well, but even just Hopkins season, if he gives you one season like he has in the past, like that's a horrible deal for you. You have to sharpshoot the pick exactly. And you probably won't.
Exactly. No matter how great you are.
Sorry.
You could be the best rookie drafter on the planet, and your hit rate is just you're not going to find Hopkins. Like,
well, not just the hit rate, it's the high end. Like Hopkins, again, he can put up a top 5 or 8 season. That is really tough to get right. Even, give you 105 every year. That's tough to get, especially from wide receiver. And we just said it's hard to get wide receiver right. So like you said, you're sitting there with Hopkins, 2 or 3 other core guys. Why the heck would you move off of those guys? Pretty much ever. And it's hard to kind of see yourself as like, oh yeah, I earned 101 this year with all those guys. I mean, you would have to have the laundry list of injuries
Literally
or everything go wrong else otherwise. So you're probably looking at middle of the pack, or, oh man, I just missed the playoffs as sort of a worst case scenario. Why would you say no to that?
And it's funny you mentioned Hopkins specifically, because this is a perfect example of this. Someone offered this to me during a rookie draft. They offered me Hopkins for my 109. I couldn't. I know Jordan says like the run over the grandma. I couldn't smash accept that fast enough.
Yeah, and 109, like that was one thing I was more open to this year than ever before, which is you get to the later first round, you're looking at guys like Devonta Smith. Again, who knows? Could he be great? Sure, but that's not my projection for him. Or Jalen Waddle. I mean, the dude wasn't dominant in college, and yet we're going to project him high end. I don't care where he went in the draft. Like, if you weren't strongly productive and dominantly productive in college, the odds of you doing it in the NFL are pretty darn low, regardless of draft position. So yeah, I was trading 107 through 109 or 10 repeatedly for, let me try to get Keenan Allen. Let me try to get Mike Evans. Like, I got some of those deals done, and unless you knock on the door, you'll never know. But in the rookie draft, when you're on the clock and someone's like, oh, I can get Rashad Bateman. Oh, I can get, Devonta Smith. That's your moment. The rookies are at an absolute peak. Veterans are, I'm not going to say worthless, but they're just not appealing. And that's when you can do the flip. And again, I mean, you're gonna win those trades a lot, and that's the other thing, is you can't be afraid to lose a deal. So just because, let's play this out. I mean, let's say you traded for Tyler Lockett with 109, and he ends up getting hurt this year, and then Russell Wilson ends up getting pushing his way out for a trade or whatever. Things just erode quickly. That singular outcome there should not say that this is not a foundational strategy or point to explore repetitively in your leagues. It means that one scenario. This is like, you have 101, you drafted a stud running back, you drafted Najee Harris, and it didn't work out. Like, or Trent Richardson, right? Like, you draft that and you're like, oh, it didn't work out. Well, that typically doesn't happen with round 1 running backs that go highly. Again, outlier outcomes doesn't mean that the strategy is not sound.
Okay, and we'll finish this. I'll finish this up by saying that it's part of what I love about your pod, especially with you and Jordan on the Football Guys Dynasty show, is you guys definitely point out the importance of points and not just pretty roster value, or liquidity is important, but so are the Mike Davises and the Mike Evans of the world that people aren't valuing. So I enjoy hearing that, because I feel like a lot of Dynasty podcasts, it's just get rid of the old guys and get the young guys and all that kind of stuff. But the next one, I'll throw it to you first, Scott, is the talent versus situation argument. And again, the disclaimer, obviously you want both. And this mostly applies to rookies when we talk about it, but I think you can also sometimes apply it to other situations. Like Stephon Diggs, for example, would probably be a good example of talent versus situation last year. So I kind of think all three of us will probably say talent in Dynasty, but I wanted to get your take first, Scott.
Yeah, this one's pretty easy too. I mean, it's always talent, and I know like AJ Brown's kind of the poster child for that. Yeah. And you know what? This year it's probably Bateman, or at least for me it is. So, I'm always going to bet on talent for the most part. If I have two guys really close, and it's like I can't really pick either way, and one's maybe in a better situation to produce earlier, or so I think, then I might lean that way. But again, that's a combination, right? Because they're similar talent, and now you're just going with situation. But otherwise, I'm always going to take the talent and hope it works out. But I guess there are times where you're like, I think this CEH is the biggest one for me, right? He goes in the first round. He goes at the Chiefs. And it's like he just flew up. How does he go to 101? I mean, It still blows my mind, but
well, and what's funny is now
overvaluing situation.
Now he's what's interesting is he posted a success track year one, and now he's cheaper. Now people are sort of and this is what I love is like I'm fading him for days last year, and now I'm kind of in. Now I'm actually doing some pivots towards him this offseason, and I'm like, all right, like the situation's actually better this year where we don't think Le'Veon Bell is coming back, and he got a year in the system. I mean, I think he could be a top 5-6 guy this year, and yet he's going to be the classic post-hype sleeper when after week one last year, wasn't it just bonkers? Like, it was like, oh my God, he had like 150 yards, and it was like, this is it. This is it. What is it, the Michael Scott? This is happening. It's happening.
Another guy like that for me is a guy you guys talk a lot about on that Football Guy show, I feel like, is Josh Jacobs, who I know you guys like a lot still, and I'm kind of warming up to him now too. Like I actually kind of felt that I wasn't as high on him as a lot of the community was, and now, but I think it's gone so far the other way now. It's kind of ridiculous. Like, is Kenyan Drake really going to play that big of a role? I mean, he's Kenyan Drake. So, you want to speak to that a little bit, Chad?
Well, I think the thing with Kenyan Drake is I started doing the fuzzy math, and I mean, even if he took all the non-Jacobs touches from last year, Jacobs could pretty much do what he was doing, and Drake would have a decent stat line. So I think this could be they're over DeAndre Washington, who's gone. Jalen Richard actually just got dinged up. I don't know how seriously it is, but I mean, if you have a two-man backfield there, and that's mostly it, that's 90-something% of the touches or whatever, then you can eat. We've seen with Chubb and we've seen with Kareem Hunt. So I think Drake could still be, a top 40, top 45 guy in PPR. And that doesn't mean Jacobs is not going to be in the top 20 or even higher than that. So I just, the interesting part when you guys were going was the talent versus situation. Talent, I sort of use a proxy for that as profile. And so that could mean, again, you have draft pedigree, you have their metric profile per se, when they're coming out of college. But then once they get in, they're building data points. So Josh Jacobs right now, 2 top 24 seasons, round one pedigree. I mentioned Edwards-Helaire, right? I mean, he's got 1 year, round one pedigree, 1 year, finished top 20 or so, and boom. I mean, he's success track. And so they keep building on this. And what I always say is when a guy hits twice, I mean, they pretty much get into lock and load mode. And that works at quarterback, that works at wide receiver. It pretty much works across the board. And so those are the guys that all you have to do is sniff around, look around, and that should really be your target list. So for me, the talent is really that shifting profile over and over again. And I will say situation, that there are some quasi-static situations. I always look at contracts. I look at who's actually going to be movable. Like for me right now, Robert Woods, for example, he's kind of locked in with the Rams the next couple of years. You got Matt Stafford, you got Sean McVay. I don't know. Like that's a good situation. I don't know if it changes. So if you're looking at like in the NFL, a 2-year window where things aren't really going to change, that's really kind of nice, and like, so that's why, Patrick Mahomes, if you get attachment with him, I know it hasn't worked for Hardman, but in general, I mean, if you get that attachment to a stud quarterback, that's when I think at wide receiver or tight end, it does make a difference. Running back, I don't know. I think things change so rapidly with a new coaching staff, and you really do have to go all the way back to talent and profile a lot. And that's why I think Trey Sermon's going to be interesting because 49ers, he got the pedigree. We know that system can put up big numbers with almost anybody. But, he gets a little bit of pedigree, but it wasn't a ton. It was 3rd round. So I think the price is fine. I haven't really situationally been this interested with the guy since Alvin Kamara went all in on him when he went to the Saints. They're not really as players. But I think there's that explosive upside potential in the perfect storm. But also there's that, I knew he wasn't that great, in terms of like, he's got an okay profile, but if the Shanahan love and factor doesn't like multiply him, I think it'll be interesting for those that, it's 107, 110, something like that this year that, again, that is a little bit more of a situational play than a true talent play, just because there's a drop off at running back this year. That's why Michael Carter's going so high.
I agree with what you're saying on Sermon. I'm curious what your thoughts are. I saw you make a couple different faces there, Scott. So I'm curious what just before we move on to the next one, what your thoughts are on Sermons. Just chat him up. I wasn't sure if that was a positive or a negative face there.
So our good buddy John Paul Hurley posted on Twitter the other day about Sermon, and I replied that in 46 Dynasty leagues I have 0 shares, so he's gonna be amazing.
I was gonna say that's telling when you have 0, because you start doing the tally at the end of your rookie draft season, you're like, yep, 0. I got 0 of these notable guys.
Yep.
And that's I will say, I say kudos, because a lot of times people will randomly, I actually know somebody that they try to get between, like, they want to have exposure to everybody, and then they don't want to be over 20%. Like, they have all this stuff. And I'm like, I thought Dynasty was about who do you like and having your sword and going into battle. Like, I'm not afraid to have 50, 60, 70% of a rookie coming out if I like them. And I thought that's what it's all about. Like, you're in and you love this price point, you love the profile, go get them. And this whole like, oh, I got to stop, I got 28%. Like, I thought that was like a best ball thing where you play 500 leagues and you're like, yeah, you probably should stop at about 30%. I kind of understand that logic.
Yeah, and it's funny. I think I don't know for sure, but I think I'm also at 0% on Sermon, and I'm in 30 pluses myself.
Wow,
this is
I got enough for all three of us.
I don't even hate him per se.
Here's what I will say. Yeah, I was just Sermon over the wide receivers in that range and over going like Trevor Lawrence. Like, that was my biggest take, was that running backs hit earlier. Running backs are liquid. Running backs have high impact, and wide receivers, you typically wait. I didn't like the profile. I do like Bateman compared to the others. But in general, wide receivers are pretty risky to take in rookie drafts because, again, they haven't done anything. So are they going to be an alpha? Are they going to do it multiple seasons? We get a lot of false positives. And what does Sermon have to do to turn a profit and be in your lineup? All he has to do, frankly, is to be the 1A or 1B, which seems like a relative given considering you got Jeff Wilson out, Wayne Gallman. I mean, it's really Mostert, who hasn't been healthy, and Sermon at this point. I don't know. It feels like you said, like you were like, I got 0 shares, which means it's probably going to happen. I kind of feel like logically the situation makes too much sense to actually happen that way.
Yeah, and I see what you're saying. It's just I'm playing mostly in super flex leagues, so he was going early second, and I was generally
that turn,
and I guess I just did like the receivers more. And I hear what you're saying. There's definitely a better chance that at least you can get a flip opportunity with Sermon.
Were you in on Mac Jones in that same zone, that late first, early second?
Not really. I have a couple of max shares, but I think like maybe 2. Yeah. 1 share. So
wow, you guys are like my anti-group. Like, it's like every guy we'll just swap player shares. So you guys got like 3 total, and it's like, wow, I got like 15 or whatever. It's like,
yeah, I actually did like Mac more than Wilson. That's why I at least have a couple shares, and Wilson was always going way earlier than I would.
Oh yeah, like half a round, right? That to me was the insane part, is that getting quarterback right, like outside of 101s usually, but if you go 102 through like the mid first in the NFL draft, good luck getting that order right. Like, who do you think's the best? Who do you think's the worst? And that's why we always think it's funny that, like, with we kind of call it the Josh Allen rule, which is when they start fading through the floor, just take them. And like Mac Jones, for example, you're telling me I get a top half of round 1 quarterback who lit the world on fire, by the way. This isn't like some projection guy. Like, he literally was the oracle for Alabama that no one saw coming and said, Bryce Young, go sit over there. And yet he goes to the Patriots and gets, 15 overall or something. And everyone's like, yeah, I can't touch that guy. I think that's hilarious that's the whole thing. It's like, wow, Belichick is so awesome. And their weapons are better. I don't know. Like, if Mac Jones hits, I just think it's going to be pretty hilarious because everyone was like, oh yeah, I was there the whole time. You passed at 201 on that guy. Okay.
Hey, I'm pretty sure I took him 108 in our league, Rocky, in
the Tecmo league.
Recent one. Yeah. So I think I actually do have 2 shares, so
I have a couple too, because he was fun. I think I got him at 111 in a league. But yeah, and part of it for me too is that I like half my leagues I tend not to have first round picks, so I trade a lot of them away in season and stuff like that. So But okay, we'll move on to these last couple and then get to find me a trade. So the next one that was in the tweet was studs versus depth, which I think is a little bit of an interesting one. I think I tend to personally, I mean, obviously we all want studs. I try to get as many studs as I can, but I do think my teams tend to have a little more depth. My rosters are generally deep in most of the leagues I'm in. It's usually around 30-man rosters and starting 10. And I do like to have guys behind those 10 that I feel like I can start. So, Chad, where are you on studs versus depth?
Well, like you said, I think if the stronger the team you are, it becomes all about studs. Like I usually have this rule, like I'm trying to get one more stud a year. And like we were talking about earlier, that could be someone like DeAndre Hopkins. It could be, hey, is there a slight discount on Christian McCaffrey? All of a sudden, I can afford to pay 2 or 3 pieces and get him, you know? So those guys that literally, as an opponent, you don't want to play, those are the types of guys. Is it a Tyreek Hill? Can you splurge and get a Mahomes or some stud at quarterback? Even if it's a start one, maybe you normally play committee, but that's the last missing piece. So yeah, I think that's important. I will say depth is kind of interesting. The more shallow it is, like I've started doing some strategy stuff. I'm in a few FFPC leagues, and depth is really meaningless because the waiver wire is so close to your last few players that it's all liquid. Like you can find streamers and stuff, but deeper, best ball, that's when I think depth is a lot more important, and you get some of these leagues that are start 10, start 12. I mean, it gets very expansive, and depth matters a lot more. A lot of the study I've done to make some of the trade calculator settings at UTH is based on that. So I think that you really have to look at the type of format you're in, and then number of starters, those factors. Best ball, like I said, is where depth pays, but depth is replaceable. Like I'm typically the one that churns depth for picks to try to find more studs. And then the picks, again, you can maybe find studs that are just a little older with those. So that's kind of the general breakdown for me of studs versus depth. And I think with your dynasty teams, it really is centric to how good you are, because if you have 1 or 2 studs but no depth and you're a rebuilding team, the move is to really trade your studs. I mean, because it's going to take you a while to build around. So it really is situational how you think about this one, what your team dynamic is, and then again, how aggressive you're going to be, and then also the format.
Yeah, so I'm glad you said that there at the end, because I was going to say I'm going to make it real simple. I mean, who doesn't want studs, right? But ultimately, if I'm competing, I want to get as many studs as I want. If I'm rebuilding, it's not so much that I don't want studs. It's just that I'm likely going to trade them, and I'm probably going to have more depth because I'm churning, whether it's late picks, waiver wire, whatever. I'm going to keep trying to move through that depth to acquire those studs. So yeah, that's exactly how I feel about it. And format is really a big thing too. Like in best ball, for example, your depth may not be the same as what it would be when you're setting a lineup, right? Because those depth pieces that are like the guy that has 2 big games a year, that's a depth piece for you on best ball, but it's not on your traditional rosters because you don't know when to start him. Whereas you're getting that game from him in best ball. So
it's wide receivers. Wide receivers is the perfect example. You have so many guys that are quote unquote best ball specials or best ball viable, where good luck. I mean, you would want no part of them in a traditional league, like McCole Hardman, or I guess Paris Campbell, or like Gabriel Davis last year. Like, when do you start these ancillary guys? Well, you encompass all that in best ball, which is why I'm open to having a few more wide receivers in best ball, because they're going to post a few more games, but yet it's highly unpredictable, but yet they might go two for 75 and a touchdown, and all of a sudden they're in there.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, format, I think, definitely is a big factor. But yeah, I'd say that pretty much covers that. So on to the last one here, team structure versus player evaluation. So Rocky, if you want to define that a little bit.
Yeah, I was trying. That was the most, I think kind of ill-defined one on there.
At that a couple different ways.
I was kind of looking at it as, like, for example, our buddy John Hogue has a very specific way he likes to structure his teams. It almost doesn't matter the players. He likes 5 quarterbacks in Superflex, and he carries, like, he picks a bunch of backup running backs, hoping they hit at some point during the season, as opposed to just, going for the best players regardless of position, which is kind of the way I would tend to lean. I think it's kind of the old saying that, if you pick the right players, any strategy will work. So that's kind of where I fall. But Chad, what do you think?
Yeah, I was going, the way I thought about this team structure would be sort of, trying to rebalance your roster is kind of how, and I do that quite a bit with trading. And this goes back to the whole, draft for talent, draft the best players you possibly can, or use your picks in drafts to do that. And then worry about your lineup later, so if you're a little too heavy at one spot or another, you may want to stay that way. But also, that's why, if I get really heavy at running back, that's sort of one of my things is, that's a position I gravitate towards, whether it's drafting or getting off the waiver wire. But that means at certain points, if it starts to bulge or I'm weak somewhere else, I'm going to reposition, my assets and try to pick up a wide receiver and trade, or I'm going to trade for a tight end. Why? It's difficult to draft one well. So those are the types of things where you kind of want to look at hit rates of, if I do this, whether that's Devy or rookie or just young player, and you say, well, what's the easiest and most difficult things to do within that? I'm going to do the opposite to trade. So, you kind of have to work backwards there, or what's easy to get from the waiver wire and what's difficult to get from the waiver wire, those types of things. And then you put it all together in sort of an equation there. So I would just highlight with this point, don't worry so much about your lineup, in the off season. Even now, you're a month out, injuries are going to happen. Who knows what backups you have that are going to suddenly be viable. And the other thing I would say is you get to week 1 and, hey, I don't really have a tight end. Well, A, does that matter? B, that doesn't mean in a week or two you should just go hog wild and, trade a first for Tyler Higbee or something, or, whatever. Like, you should still have patience and say, A, that might not matter. B, what if a month into the season I'm not competitive? That trade might look horrific because I was thinking so short term. And then C, you need to make dynasty trades at all times. So that's independent of what your team needs. I need to make a good value judgment and good dynasty trade, whatever my lineup looks like, whatever my roster looks like.
And so, I guess, Scott, how did you interpret that one, and what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think I kind of thought of it more as like a startup mentality, or even like a rookie draft mentality too, as like it's always acquiring the best talent and not worrying about if they're what position they are. Are they on the same team? Like things like that. I don't worry about it. Like whatever. Right. I'm just gonna draft how I draft, regardless. Startup, rookie draft, doesn't matter. I mean, ultimately, I think you have to be cognizant of the player evaluation for yourself to know the guys that you're targeting, and the guys that you want to watch. And early in the season, you can't be afraid to be patient and wait it out to kind of see where things are going, but also be able to strike when there's opportunity to say, and that's, Chad, I think that's exactly what you were saying is, okay, I don't have an RB2 or I don't have a tight end or whatever it is. But if there's somebody who starts off slow, or maybe they got hurt or whatever it may be, go get that guy, because that might be the guy for you the second half of the season, or that might put you over the edge. So, I think team structure doesn't really come into play for me until like I know if I'm competing or not. Basically, that's when it makes an impact for me.
Okay, so I guess that'll finish up that discussion. A lot of good talk there, I think, and we'll move on to our Find Me a Trade segment, which this week was, and I've been meaning to do this because we kind of just assume that people know what we're talking about, but the Find Me a Trade, for anybody who hasn't heard before, is we have somebody send in a roster. The three of us look for trades for them, and just kind of a way to evaluate trades and values and things like that with a specific roster. to kind of give a little more insight into it. So if you have any rosters you'd like us to look over, or even if you feel pretty confident and just never hurts to have another set of eyes. So if you want to send it in, you can always send it to me at Dynasty FF Addict, or Scott or Andrew, our third host, or the pod at Dynasty Junkies, that handle. So I just like to give that reminder every once in a while. But this one was submitted by Jeremy Hayes at Coach Hayes 7 on Twitter. It's a 12-team. It's a safe league. It's 12-team PPR Superflex 2.0 tight end premium. 6-point passing TDs, -4 for INTs, 28-man roster. Start 10, which is a QB, 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, tight end, the super flex, and then 2 flex. And he said he won the league the first year, got second last year with CNC and Kittle being hurt. And safely, he's got pretty lucky with some trades and drafting. I could just sit on it, but never hurts to ask. And so asked us to look over this roster, see if there are any trades. And why, Scott, why don't you go over what that roster is, and I'll try and throw it up and share my screen while you're going over it.
All right, so this is a pretty typical safe league setup. They did change recently that your future picks are not available unless you pay for the future year. And I mean, I think that's fine. Like if that's how you want to do it, but
they don't even appear. They don't even appear until you pay.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like if you trade it and then you have to pay, okay, but they're not there. So
pay to trade leagues. It really stunts trading.
I do hate that. Yeah, for that very reason.
This hurts. I'm in a lot of safe leagues. I may be looking to get out of some because it's really, if I'm a contender, it's fine because I can just pay and I know I'm going to be there anyway. And then I can have my picks to trade away. But if I'm rebuilding, like this totally screws me in my strategy. I mean, I'm constantly, adding a third to move up to a second or throwing in, a third to make a deal happen, so it's like,
Have you seen this before though? That I had an environment in a safe league where I traded for a pick. So I got somebody's second or whatever it was. Did you know that pick is still invisible to me? It's an added pick. It's a bonus pick. So even that one won't appear. I get my own won't
appear. So you wouldn't be able to trade it.
You still can't trade if it's a 4-round draft. You have 5 additional picks you've traded for. You can't trade any of those picks. So I have 9 picks in 4 rounds in that scenario or whatever. You still cannot trade any of those without you yourself paying.
Oh, wow.
Does not compute.
Okay.
You can just keep adding picks to your coffer. You still can't trade any away.
I mean, I kind of get it with something as big as safe leagues. No, I don't do it in any of my leagues.
They just don't want to have to manage if they have to reverse a trade, you have 24 hours to pay in season, like the timeline gets so compressed and they don't want issues. I get all that, but I'm of the ilk of why don't you just have everyone pay half of their league dues for the next year, and now everyone has all the picks, do whatever you want.
Yes. Or pay, you pay 2 years, so you just pay a year ahead.
Like half or all or
whatever. And
now you have people that, I didn't have to pay for this year. Let's see how this year goes. And I think you get more orphan situations to get off on a rabbit hole here. But I think you're going to have more ownership in those leagues because there's no deposits, because there's no investment and commitment to the future.
Well, and that's exactly it. I think that they've not had an issue filling orphans. So like, in fact, some teams end up selling because they auction them early. They sell for more than whatever the buy-in is. So it's like, you guys aren't hurting for this. So why are you doing, and I mean, I love Scott and Ryan. So sorry to shit on, like, I'm not trying to, but it is really frustrating.
The format is the format, right?
Yeah. And I feel at this point, there's enough degenerates out there like us that are be like, I'll turn that team around and we'll pay anyway. Yeah. I've taken horrible teams and paid for them in non-safe leagues. Yeah. So, but anyway, let's get into the roster, Scott, after we went down that rabbit hole.
So, okay, this guy definitely a contender here. He loses Watson, which hurts a little bit, but Patrick Mahomes, Dak Prescott, the aforementioned Watson, Jordan Love, Davis Mills, Gardner Minshew. So good overall. 2 top end guys. That's elite for sure. Tight end. again, 2 top end guys with Waller and Kittle, some depth with Drew Sample and Dalton Schultz. Running back, not so great. He does have CMC, which helps. Gio Bernard, Tariq Cohen, Kenyan Drake, Tony Pollard, James White, Jamal Williams. So guys that could fill in your RB2 spot. So that's okay if that's your weak spot. That can be overcome.
Injury away guys there.
But if CMC doesn't play again, then obviously you're gonna end up how you did last year. So we might need to fix that a little bit. And then wide receiver Keenan Allen, Tutu Atwell, John Brown, Cephas, Tyreek Hill, Darnell Mooney, Cornell Powell, Debo Samuel, RIP, and Michael Thomas. So decent overall. A couple high-end guys there for sure with Hill and Allen. Those guys will give you a floor and an upside, which is nice. But Thomas hurt again. Debo never going to come back. So let's move on.
What is your Debo hate, Scott? I wasn't aware of this until tonight.
It's I love Debo. He's like literally one of my favorite receivers to watch, like film. Loved him in college. Loved him coming out. Had a ton of shares. But that foot issue, among all the other issues he has, he's never going to be the same. Never going to be the same. So I'm out. I've shed all my Debo shares at this point, I think.
It's funny. I have one. So we seem to be very similar on certain players, Scott. You want to get into his tight ends before we get to the trades?
Yeah, well, I did. I mentioned them right away because he's stacked there with Waller and Kittle.
I missed that. I'm sorry. Okay, so let's get into the trade. Scott, you want to do yours first then? Just go right into yours?
Yeah. So obviously, I think it behooves this our guy here, actually, Coach Hayes, to go ahead and pay for next year, because I mean, you're not giving up that team. Like, let's be honest. So if it were me, I'm probably paying for next year. I'm going to take those picks and I'm going to trade them away, because they're not going to be my problem. If, like Chad was saying, if I'm acquiring picks and I can't do anything with them, whatever, it's not going to be my problem. I'll move them if I need to. I'm looking at potentially moving a guy like Debo, package deal, whatever. There's a lot of guys out there that love Debo, and I don't get it, because I wasn't even that high. I love it.
Even in your write-up here, it said could move Debo, whose career is over. I don't think most people feel Debo's career is over.
Okay, well, great. It's a great time to move him then. There's a couple teams that I pointed out. I think Book of Ezekiel, he had a couple of players that maybe you could try to pick off, but I think he's going to have to be patient. Some of the teams, it looks like there's kind of a clear divide as far as there's a few bad teams, there's a few really good teams. So obviously it's going to be hard to get a player like Chris Carson off a good team if they feel like he can help them win a championship. Then they're not going to give him to another contender. But he's somebody who I might be targeting to fill that RB2 spot. Another team is Nukem, I guess. I guess it's a play. Oh, I get it. Nukem. Okay, good one. That is a rough squad. So that one, maybe you could move Debo or a package upgrade. Get your future picks, throw Debo in a first for Nick Chubb, and go win a championship. That's what I would be doing.
Yeah, I like the general idea there of trying to grab a running back. I do think, and this and actually my trade will kind of go to some of the points we talked about earlier. August, actually, I do start kind of thinking about, positions and things like that. During the rest of the off season, I generally don't, but I do start once we get into this point of the season, like we said, football is back. I do start kind of thinking about, maybe a little bit more about who my RB2 might be, or in a league where you have to start two. So he definitely could use another running back. So I think those trades, if you can pull that for Debo, makes some sense. What do you think? Can you get Nick Chubb for Debo in a first, Chad?
Maybe. Chubb's recent action probably helps a little bit in terms of the stability and confidence in him. But first, and a player of slight intrigue, even if Debo doesn't get optimal, I think that's sort of the range for Chubb, honestly, at his age. So I think that's a good proxy valuation, is a first plus, and that certainly qualifies. The first gets a little boost there with tight end premium and Superflex as well.
And yeah, so like I said, I think the idea of running back is good. And Chad, I just realized you don't have anything on the sheet here. Were you able to find something? Or,
No, I got plenty. I actually wanted to go over a couple different, because a lot of times on the UTH premium shows, we talk about concepts and we use it as proxies for players. So insert player here. I wanted to talk about a couple things. Again, he's got a really good team. So we are looking for ways to improve something that's already highly promising / has already been a championship winner in this format. And I wanted to talk just a little bit. You mentioned that they're weak at running back. And the way you attack that can be, trading your first, going after somebody in a trade. But I think just volume wise, it's 28-man rosters. And I'm in this type of format in safe leagues, which means a lot of quarterbacks are rostered, more tight ends than typical are rostered, which means you're going to have some waiver, running back 2s and 3s of import available for basically free. I think there's some inefficiencies on his depth chart. Now, I think what he's doing at quarterback is pretty sound. The ones that he has rostered, should Drew Sample be rostered? Noah Gray, I know he's got his supporters. I know it's tight end premium, but I think there might be a spot or two with tight end you could clean out. And then the specific thing I wanted to mention was the wide receiver versus running back kind of ratio here. He's weak at running back, but if you don't have a lot of starters, then I think you got to go towards, these are different depth charts that I think could be ripe if there's an injury. They also are ones that could be ambiguous. Like he doesn't have any cracks at, say, one of the 3 or 4 guys on the Jets, and they're all pretty cheap. One of them may be on the waiver wire. So having a chip in a chair in an ambiguous depth chart is a way to do that. And it's not best ball. We kind of talked about that earlier in the show, that can point to more wide receivers being on your roster. But let's see what happens. I kind of understand, I guess, Quintus, Cephas, but Tutu Atwell, that's a tough pick to make if it's not best ball. I know he has the pedigree. I'm intrigued by him, but the ultimate upside in a head-to-head format color me skeptical. Cornell Powell, again, you're making these picks that I don't know what the end game here is. For Cornell Powell was like a special teamer, and so I just. So John Brown, I think you do have to hold out, for example, on him. He could be the wide receiver 1 for the Raiders. That makes sense. But that could be someone you end up fading off by October if it doesn't work out. So I think he needs to. I think Deebo Samuel is a good call there. But I also think Darnell Mooney, he's got some heat right now. Is he an alpha wide receiver in the NFL? Yes or no? It's rhetorical. The answer is no. So my point is, and you've got an ambiguous situation with their quarterback, Allen Robinson. Is he going to be there next year? Probably not, maybe not. But the point is, if he goes away, Mooney being wide receiver 1, I mean, that's no given or anything. Like he's a day 3 guy that showed some promise last year. Good, promising start above baseline for where he was drafted. That doesn't mean he's a future top 20 guy. Could he be? I guess, the outlier of outlier type situations. But for me, Atwell, I know you drafted him, but you're going to use that as a crutch. I don't know where he took him, but that's going to be something that you hold on to all year. And it's going to hold you back from a lot of running back opportunities, in my opinion. So Atwell, we'll see about, like Cephas, I would make a very quick decision. If he is wide receiver 2, 3 on that depth chart, you're probably out of there. Trying to flip, can you just get a third, move out of there? Can you flip it to a running back that's an injury away? You got Jamal Williams, but guys like that, Gus Edwards, so I would be trying to flip Mooney, Powell back to the wire, Deebo Samuel. I think you can get lean and mean because you got, I would love it if John Brown was your last wide receiver. You got Allen, you got Tyreek Hill, Michael Thomas, you hold him for the midseason push. I would just, shed a little bit, get more running backs, but I like where you're cooking at quarterback. And again, the top 2, 3 tight ends, you got no problems there. I just think there's 3 or 4 roster spots. You could definitely do some damage that it could be trading because obviously you've got some guys that are above that threshold. But by the time week 1 or week 3 hits, I think you got to be looking out the corner of your eye at some of those running back situations as opposed to these pure depth wide receivers.
Yeah, I like the angle you kind of took on doing this was, just kind of come up with different ideas and like you said, concepts. I like the idea of just, not paying too much and coming up with some of those other lower end type running backs, and eventually, hopefully between all the guys you have on there, like you said, sheer volume, you can maybe make up the difference of not having running back too. And so, yeah, I definitely like that idea. I feel like, given some of what you said, you may not like my trade so much, but
oh no. Well, can I just say one more thing? Like, for example, I just looked up the free agent listings for the league, and Jerick McKinnon's out there, Matt Breida's out there, Ty Johnson. I wasn't even predicting the future, but that's a Jets option of let's see how this goes. Larry Roundtree, is he going to be in that top 3 mix for the Chargers? All this is going to get fleeced out in the next few weeks. Mm-hmm. But if you have him now for a buck, or a $0 bid, Jake Funk, what if he's the number 2 guy with the Rams? Like, there's 4 or 5 guys that all of a sudden, one of them's probably going to be a guy that you're glad you picked up in early August, and now it's week 1 and you got him. And if he was out there, might be a $10, $15, $20 bid. You never know.
Yep, and I'll just go into mine real quick, and then we can kind of finish up. So I actually did come up with a specific trade, and my thing was, and it kind of maybe contradicts some of what you were saying, that and it kind of goes back to what we were saying earlier about studs versus depth. I felt he needed a little more depth, even within his starting lineup. If you actually try and pick 10 starters, it doesn't look great, especially if you consider Debo dead, as Scott does, and especially with Michael Thomas injured. He's got maybe 8 solid starters. He could maybe get away with that with the collection of studs he does have, and Mahomes and Dak and CMC and the 2 tight ends. So maybe you can just plug almost anyone else in there. But I kind of wanted to fill out his lineup a little more, to have more possibly 10 capable starters. So what I did was I also went to that Book of Ezekiel team that Scott mentioned earlier. And I want to say, because I know Scott will think otherwise, but I actually did try. I wanted to try and keep his quarterbacks intact with Dak and Mahomes, because I really did like that.
No, you didn't.
I knew you were going to say that, but I just couldn't. The only other option was maybe to trade from the tight ends, but I didn't want to do that either with the 2.0 tight end premium. So I went to my classic move of trading down from quarterback to try and get him some depth, which is I went with Dak to Book of Ezekiel team for Tom Brady, Josh Jacobs, and Chase Claypool. So I didn't do anything with picks. And basically my thinking was, like I said, the depth, and Jacobs is an undervalued asset right now, as we talked about earlier. He's also still pretty young. Claypool's pretty young. So you have some security there, some upside there. And Dak to Brady, I don't feel it's definitely probably a downgrade, even in production, let alone
definitely
value.
Probably. You can't even say it.
What?
Definitely, probably.
Did
Come
I say
on.
that? Okay, it's probably a production downgrade, but and it's definitely a value downgrade. But I don't think you're losing a ton there points wise. I mean, Brady's probably going to finish as a low end QB1. We'll see how Dak does this year coming back from the injury. And you're picking up, like I said, Claypool and Jacobs. The Book of Ezekiel team, they're kind of a perfect match in that Ezekiel has a ton of depth that he could be trading away. He has 4 different startable running backs. He's got Claypool's probably his wide receiver 5. He has Allen Robinson and Hopkins and some other guys, Allen Robinson, Robert Woods. So there might be expendable pieces to him. He probably should be looking to consolidate some of that depth to upgrade on his team. He's got Fitz and Matthew Stafford and Brady as his quarterbacks. So I think it makes some sense on his end. And like I said, I like getting the starters for this team. So you both have some interesting looks on your faces. So I'll go to Chad first. What do you think of that?
No, I like what you're saying. Build up your depth. The pivot down, from a quarterback that's hot to another one that's not, I think is a foundational thing. You threw in some players that Claypool a little hot, Jacobs not. That could absolutely be something that works. Yeah, I think that you have to make sure, especially when you're building up depth, because you are pivoting downward, that you need to go with foundational profiles. That would be the biggest key. Now, I'm a big Claypool fan. I was not, to be fair, I should have been bigger on him coming out because he was going at that late second, early third round range last year where, let's face it, not a lot going on. So that was a real misfire in terms of, you're talking about a unicorn athlete size movement of what if. He definitely looks the part of an alpha. And so that was a part. So
we're misfiring on that one now.
And well, some people were in. I do remember some league mates that like they were just like tractor beam. That was the guy. If they were trading down, trading up, like it was specifically to get in Claypool's zone. But now when you look at his frame, what he was coming out, and then what he did year one, those guys hit for top 12 quite a bit. Now he hasn't done it yet, and who knows with the competition for targets, it may not happen this year. But he's on a very good track. I'll actually be interested if he's still the wide receiver 2-3 for that depth chart. He's one that, I'm going to be exploratory mid-season, maybe even January before Juju actually leaves or things like dynamics at play. Oh, Ben Roethlisberger's going to retire. I think that might be the final dip you get to actually get an affordable price point there. But yeah, I think Jacobs, again, can you play it relatively safe? And then Claypool, again, would add a ton of upside there. So I think both of you are on the right track. And the other part would be looking at the right teams. And I think you both did that well in terms of that can be your greatest avenue is selecting the right team for the right type of deal you're trying to do. So it fits with what they're looking to do as well. If they need a stud quarterback, if they need, something that you're strong in, that is such a natural trade fit that you can really optimize your time sending offers.
Yeah, and my other thought with the Brady to Dak to Brady thing too is it's quite a bit of a downgrade, but he also has Watson, who I believe is going to play in the league again. So I really think that Dak is a guy you can afford to move on.
Short term, long term, yeah.
Yeah. So Deshaun Watson, if not this year, then in 2022 becomes your QB2 again. And if Brady's still in the league, he's your QB3.
It's funny how you say, "Oh yeah, Watson just slides in as your QB2." Like he's a QB1 for a ton of people. But if you're sitting with Mahomes, you're like, "Yeah, you're gonna be over there. You're gonna be my flex guy, okay? Okay, Deshaun, you're gonna be Captain Superflex. Is that okay? All right with you? We're gonna go pummel some people."
Right. So Watson was another reason I was okay with the QB downgrade. But any final thoughts, Scott, before we finish up here?
That's exactly what I was gonna say. With his specific quarterback group, he's got 2, maybe 3 future starters there. So, Jordan Love is probably going to start maybe next year. So, or at least in a couple years. So Brady can kind of bridge the gap. So if you're trying to win, like you got a shot there. Not that he's going to be good, but you might be able to sell him. And yeah, with Watson coming back. So this might be the one time I agree. Maybe not the players you chose, but I get the strategy. I get
As you're becoming friends. Look at this. This is so nice. He's like, I agree with the sort of things you were alluding to with your statements there. Wow, high praise. You guys should start co-owning teams together. Have you guys done that yet? No, not at all. Okay. Wow, that was quickly shut down by both. If you are watching the feed, they're like absolutely not. I would rather live together than own a dynasty team with that guy.
I just don't think Scott would be on board. My QB strategy is generally to fade the high-end quarterbacks, and I don't think Scott would be on board with that. So I generally go into that middle tier and pick multiple guys.
Fighting.
So
they're fighting. I will say you learn so much. You can talk to someone till you're blue in the face, but you start having to talk through every pick and trade and minutia of a startup draft and a league together. You become like naked and afraid how the show goes in terms of, because now it's like, oh, I see how it works in this little war room. I see what you're doing. Like you spouted on the show, but when I see you do it, highly questionable.
Absolutely.
Okay, so this was a lot of good discussion. I really appreciate you coming on, Chad. So I just want to give you a chance to give everybody your Twitter handle, plug your shows or anything else you want to plug. So go right ahead.
Yeah, sure. Great time of year to, of course, be listening to good podcasts like this. I do over 250 just on the premium side for UTH alone.
Wow.
So that is a major, if you love premium podcasts, we talk a lot about trading. I do a ton of solo shows, 5-minute shows, 10-minute shows. So you get plenty of episodes that you can fit into any sort of commute, walking the dog, whatever. And also have a trade calculator, rankings, all the regular stuff you would expect from a site, but get it, all those premium shows seamlessly on any podcasting device you want. So that's over at uthdynasty.com. And then, of course, Football Guys, you mentioned it, Rocky. Jordan and I have been active for now, I think, 60-something episodes, where we've really spearheaded a major advancement. Now there's a bunch of new shows over at Football Guys. So that's been the last 12 months really cool to see. And we were a part of the pilot. I guess if it didn't go well for us, that wouldn't have, there might not be 3 or 4 new shows in 2021, but that's been really exciting to have, just a huge, massive audience and kind of make it our own. And Cecil Lammy's been totally awesome. He's the program director over there. He's been on the Audible. He's, he does Denver radio. I mean, he is absolutely a pro's pro. And just to get coaching from him, I will say, just on one note, that so me being the big fish in a small pond of UTH, basically running my own thing, but being at Football Guys and seeing that great leadership, whether it's, through the things I'm actively doing, like podcasting with Cecil Lammy, whether it's Joe Bryant, David Dodds, whatever the leadership structure has been over the years, it's just been so awesome to actually be a small fish in a big pond and see leadership from the ground up. And then obviously have to cultivate that myself for, I produce most of the content at UTH, but still having contributors, obviously doing a ton of shows with Katie Flower, Jordan McNamara, and Tim Torch over the span of time as well. So I love doing both. And just being able to kind of, ride along the tide, do my own thing, contribute talent when I can at Football Guys. But doing both has really been awesome. So I always want to highlight all the positivity that they create there as well.
Yeah, that's fantastic, and a lot of good stuff going on over at Football Guys and UTH. So really enjoy listening to you. Everybody should go listen to Chad's stuff. It's very good. And I just want to finish up with some of our business here. First, I just want to say, Scott, I welcome back. I appreciate having you back after your little hiatus. This has been great tonight with you and Chad. And I did want to give a little programming note. Thursday at 9:30 is, in theory, supposed to be our regular time, but we keep having to move it around based on our schedules or guest schedules. Next week will be Wednesday, I believe, at 7 p.m., and then we should be going back to Thursday at 9:30 after that. So you can just follow me at Dynasty FF Addict, follow Scott at Scott_Skidlow, follow the pod at Dynasty Junkies, and also make sure you're following the DAP network at DAP_network. You can see on there when we go live. Also, if you subscribe to the YouTube and hit the bell, you can get notified when we go live on YouTube as well. And just also make sure you are following both there on YouTube and on Twitter. I think that's it. So, subscribe, rate, and review. Okay, I'm done. Scott.
Junkies out.